The air was thick with the scent of grilled burgers and blooming jasmine as I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. It was Father's Day, and the backyard buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. A celebration my father, Richard, had planned for weeks. I hadn't seen him in months, not since our last argument, when his words cut deeper than I'd ever admit. But his text last week, formal and curt, had invited me to this party. Come if you can, it read, as if I were an afterthought. Still, I came, clutching a small gift box, hoping this time things might be different. I was 30 now, but stepping onto that familiar porch made me feel like a child again, small and unsure. My father had always been a towering figure, charismatic, stubborn, and fiercely proud. Growing up, I idolized him, trailing after him in his workshop as he fixed radios or tinkered with old clocks. He'd tell stories of his youth, his voice warm with nostalgia, and I'd hang on every word. But as I grew older, the warmth faded. He wanted a daughter who followed his rules, who stayed close, who didn't question him. I wanted to be me, Lila, the woman who moved to the city, chased a career in graphic design, and dared to live differently. The backyard was a sea of familiar faces, neighbors, cousins, Dad's old fishing buddies. A long table stretched across the lawn, covered in a checkered cloth and piled with food. Dad stood at the grill, his broad shoulders squared, a king in his domain. His gray hair caught the sunlight, and for a moment, I saw the man I used to know, the one who'd carry me on his shoulders at county fairs. I took a deep breath and approached, the gift box heavy in my hands. Dad, I called softly, my voice almost lost in the chatter. He turned, his eyes meeting mine. They were the same hazel as mine, but harder, guarded. Lila, he said, nodding. No smile. Didn't think you'd make it. The words stung, but I forced a smile. I wouldn't miss it. Happy Father's Day. I held out the gift, a leather-bound journal, embossed with his initials. I'd spend hours choosing it, imagining him jotting down his thoughts, maybe even about me. He took it, glanced at it, then set it on the table without a word. My heart sank, but I pressed on. It's for your stories. You know, the ones you used to tell me. He grunted, turning back to the grill. Plenty of stories here tonight. You're late. By the way, his tone was clipped, dismissive. I swallowed the hurt, scanning the table for a seat. Every chair was taken, filled with people laughing, eating, belonging. I stood awkwardly, clutching my purse, waiting for him to notice. He didn't. Dad, is there a spot for me? I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted. He flipped a burger, not looking up. No seat for you. Lila, should have come earlier. His words landed like a slap, casual but sharp. A few heads turned, eyes flickering with pity or amusement. My face burned. I wanted to argue, to demand why he'd invited me only to push me away. But the weight of everyone's stares silenced me. I set the gift on the table, turned, and walked back to my car, my steps heavy with a familiar ache. Driving away, the lights of the party faded in my rearview mirror. I wasn't just leaving the backyard. I was leaving the version of myself that kept hoping for his approval. But as the road stretched before me, a new resolve sparked. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something else. Something I'd have to figure out on my own. The city lights blurred through my windshield as I drove back to my apartment. The hum of the engine, a poor substitute for the laughter I'd left behind. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as Dad's words echoed, no seat for you. Lila. It wasn't just about a chair. It was about the space I'd never had in his world, not really. I'd spent years trying to carve out a place, to prove I was enough. But every attempt felt like shouting into a void. Back home, My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies thoughts. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, staring at the small photo frame on the coffee table. It was an old picture of me and Dad, taken when I was 10. I was grinning, holding a fish we'd caught together, his arm slung proudly around my shoulders. That was before the arguments, before Mom left, before I became the daughter who disappointed him by choosing my own path. I pulled out my phone, tempted to text him, to demand why he'd invited me only to humiliate me. But I stopped. What was the point? Instead, I opened my laptop and scrolled through old emails, landing on one from my boss, Priya. She'd offered me a project in Seattle, a big one, designing a campaign for a nonprofit focused on elderly care. It meant moving, starting over, but it also meant purpose. I'd been hesitant, tethered to the hope of fixing things with Dad. Now, that tether felt frayed. The next morning, I called Priya and accepted the job. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice warm but probing. "It's a big move, Lila." "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I need this." Packing was cathartic. I sorted through years of accumulated memory sketchbooks, photos, a faded Father's Day card I'd made at 12. Each item was a reminder of who I'd been, who I was trying to become. By the time I loaded the last box into my car, I felt lighter, unburdened. Seattle was a chance to redefine myself, away from the shadow of Dad's expectations. The drive to Seattle took 2 days, each mile a step further from the past. When I arrived, the city greeted me with rain and possibility. My new apartment was small but bright, with a view of Puget Sound that made my heart ache in a good way. I started work the next week, diving into designs that told stories of resilient stories of people like Mr. Carter, an 80-year-old volunteer who'd lost his wife but found purpose in helping others. His warmth, his quiet strength, reminded me of the father I'd once known, the one I still wanted to believe in. One evening, as I sketched at my desk, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin. "Emma, your dad's been asking about you. Seemed off at the party after you left." I stared at the words, torn between anger and curiosity. Why did he care now? I didn't respond, but the message lingered, a crack in the wall I'd built. Days turned into weeks, and Seattle became home. I found a rhythm work, coffee shops, long walks by the water. But Dad's absence was a quiet ache, like a bruise I kept pressing. I wondered if he felt it too, if he regretted that night. The journal I'd given him flashed in my mind. Did he ever open it? Did he see the note I'd tucked inside, telling him I loved him despite everything? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on my designs, on Mr. Carter's stories, on the life I was building. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. Seattle's rhythm had become my own. But the past has a way of creeping in, uninvited. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in a cafe sketching logos for the nonprofit, my phone rang. It was Emma again, her voice hesitant. "Lila, your dad's in the hospital. He had a fall. It's not serious, but he's been asking for you." The words hit like a wave, pulling me under. I wanted to feel nothing after all. He'd pushed me away, but the thought of him alone in a sterile hospital bed cracked something open in me. "I'll think about it," I said, hanging up before I could commit. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories flooded in, Dad teaching me to ride a bike, his hands steadying the handlebars. Dad yelling when I missed curfew at 16, his face red with worry. Not just anger. He was flawed, stubborn, but he was my father. I booked a flight home, telling myself it was just to check on him. Nothing more. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and regret. Dad was in a small room, his arm in a sling, his face gaunt under the fluorescent lights. He looked older, smaller, nothing like the man who'd stood so tall at the grill. When he saw me, his eyes widened, then softened. "Lila," he whispered, almost like a question. "Hey, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Heard you took a tumble." He chuckled, wincing. "Stupid step in the garage. Should have fixed it years ago." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words pressing down. I wanted to ask why he'd been so cold, why he'd made me feel like I didn't belong. But his tired eyes stopped me. Instead, I asked, "How are you feeling?" "Like an old fool," he said, his voice rough. "Missed you, kid." The admission was small, but it landed heavy. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to hug him. Part of me wanted to run. I stayed for a week, helping him settle back home. We didn't talk about the party, but the tension was there. A silent guest. One evening, I found the journal I'd given him on his bedside table, its pages still blank. I opened it. My note still tucked inside. "Dad, I hope you'll write your stories here. I'll always listen. Love, Lila." My throat tightened. Had he read it? Did it matter? Back in Seattle, work kept me grounded. Mr. Carter invited me to a community event, where he shared his story with a group of seniors. His voice trembled as he spoke of his wife, of finding purpose after loss. "You don't get to choose the pain," he said, "but you choose what to do with it." His words stuck with me, a mirror to my own struggle. I realized I wasn't just angry at Dottie, was angry at myself for holding on to hope that he'd change. I started writing to him, not emails or texts, but real letters. I wrote about Seattle, my work, the way the rain made everything feel new. I didn't expect replies, but it felt like a bridge, however fragile. One day, a package arrived, a small wooden box Dad had carved himself, etched with my initials. Inside was a note, "Lila, I'm trying. Dad." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I held the box, feeling the weight of his effort. And for the first time in months, I let myself hope not for the past to change, but for a future we might build. The wooden box sat on my desk, a quiet reminder of Dad's note. "I'm trying." Those two words carried more weight than I expected, stirring a mix of hope and skepticism. I wanted to believe he meant it, but years of disappointment had taught me to guard my heart. Still, I kept writing letters, each one a thread in the fragile bridge I was trying to build. I told him about the nonprofit's latest campaign, about Mr. Carter's stories, about the way Seattle's fog made the world feel like a dream. I didn't ask for replies, but I checked my mailbox daily, half expecting nothing. Work became my anchor. The nonprofit's campaign was gaining traction, and my designs bold. Heartfelt posters of seniors sharing their wisdom were everywhere. Mr. Carter became a mentor of sorts, his gentle humor and resilience grounding me. One day, as we sorted donations for a community center, he asked about my family. I hesitated, then told him about Dad, the party, the hospital. He listened, his eyes kind but sharp. "Sounds like your dad's carrying his own weight," he said. "Doesn't excuse what he did, but people don't push others away unless they're hurting too." His words lingered, forcing me to see Dad not just as the man who'd hurt me, but as someone wrestling with his own demons. I remembered Mom leaving when I was 12. How Dad's laughter grew rarer after that. Had I ever really asked him about it? Or had I just assumed he was fine, the way he always seemed to be? Months passed, and Dad started replying, not often, but enough. His letters were short, practical, about fixing the garage or catching fish. But one arrived with a single line about me. "Your designs sound like something I'd be proud to see." It was small, but it felt like a crack in his armor. I tucked the letter into the wooden box, next to his note. Then came the call. It was Emma, her voice urgent. Lila, your dad's throwing another Father's Day party. He wants you there. Said to make sure you know there's a seat for you this time. My heart stuttered. A year had passed since the last party, since I'd walked away. The idea of going back felt like stepping into a storm. But the thought of that deliberate gesture pulled at me. I booked a flight, telling myself I'd decide when I got there. The backyard looked the same, yet different. The table was set, the grill smoking. But Dad's shoulders seemed less rigid, his smile less forced. When he saw me, he crossed the lawn, something nervous in his eyes. Lila, he said, his voice softer than I remembered. Got a chair with your name on it. I followed him to the table, where a seat was empty, a small card with Lila written in his jagged handwriting. I sat, my chest tight. The party unfolded around us. Laughter. Stories. The clink of glasses, but it was his effort that anchored me. We didn't talk about last year. Not yet. But as he passed me a plate, his hand brushed mine, and I felt a flicker of the warmth I'd missed. That night, I stayed late, helping him clean up. In the quiet, he spoke. I read your note. In the journal. I didn't know how to say it back. His voice cracked, and I saw the man behind the pride, the one who'd been trying, in his own way, to reach me. The Father's Day party lingered in my mind as I flew back to Seattle. The image of that card with my name on it etched deep. Dad's admission that he'd read my note, that he'd struggled to respond, felt like a door cracked open. But I wasn't sure what lay on the other side. We hadn't resolved everything. We hadn't even apologized. But the fact that he'd tried, that he'd saved a seat for me, was enough to keep me writing, keep me hoping. Back in Seattle, life moved forward. The nonprofit campaign was a success, and Mr. Carter's story became its heart. At an event, he pulled me aside, his eyes twinkling. You're doing good, Lila. But don't forget your own story. His words hit home. I'd been so focused on building a new life, I hadn't fully faced the old one. I started writing longer letters to Dad. Not just about Seattle, but about Mimi fears, my dreams, the hurt I'd carried since Mom left. I wrote about the party, how his words had cut, how I'd spent years chasing his approval. It was raw, messy, but it felt like truth. I didn't know if he'd read them, but I sent them anyway, each one a step toward healing. One day, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was the journal I'd given him, its pages no longer blank. He'd written in it stories of his childhood, his days as a young father, even a few lines about Mom. One page was for me, Lila. I wasn't good at showing it, but you were always my pride. I pushed you away because I was scared of losing you like I lost her. I'm sorry. I cried reading it, the weight of his words sinking in. He wasn't perfect, but neither was I. We were both trying to navigate the space between who we were and who we wanted to be. I called him that night, our first real conversation in years. It was halting, awkward, but real. I want to visit, I said. Not for a party. Just us. He came to Seattle a month later. Seeing him in my world, away from the backyard and the weight of memory, was surreal. We walked along the Sound, the air crisp with salt and possibility. He told me about Mom, how her leaving had broken him, how he'd taken it out on me without meaning to. I told him about my life, my work, the way I'd found purpose in Seattle. We didn't fix everything, but we listened. As he left, he hugged me tight, like he used to when I was small. You've got a good life here, Lila, he said. I'm proud of you. For the first time, I believed him. Back at work, I showed Mr. Carter the journal. He smiled, his eyes crinkling. Took him a while. But he's writing his story, just like you're writing yours. I nodded, realizing that our stories weren't separate, they were tangled. Messy, but connected. And maybe that was enough. A year later, I stood in Dad's backyard again. But this time, it wasn't for Father's Day. It was just a Saturday. Unremarkable except for the fact that we were together. The table was smaller. No checkered cloth. Just a few plates of sandwiches and lemonade. It was just us, Dad, me, and Emma, who'd insisted on crashing. Family reunion. She'd teased. But her presence felt like a buffer, softening the edges of our new beginning. Dad had changed. Or maybe I was seeing him differently. His stories were back, told over coffee instead of a grill. His laughter less guarded. He'd started writing more in the journal, sending me pages now and then. They were stories of his mistakes, his hopes, even his fears. I sent him sketches and return designs inspired by his words. A way to show I was listening. That afternoon, as we sat, he brought up the party. I was wrong. Lila, he said, his voice low. That night, I was angry at myself. Not you. I didn't know how to say it. I nodded. The memory still sharp, but less painful. I know. Dad. I'm glad we're here now. We talked about Mom. About the years we'd lost. About the future. He asked about Seattle. About my work. And for the first time, he listened without judgment. I told him about Mr. Carter. About the campaign. About the way stories could heal. He smiled. A real smile. And said, "You're doing something good, kid. Better than I ever did." As the sun set, Emma pulled out her phone, snapping a photo of us. "For the journal," she said, grinning. I looked at Dad, his face softer in the golden light, and felt a quiet peace. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And that was enough. Back in Seattle, I framed the photo and placed it next to the one from my childhood. 2 moments, years apart, but part of the same story. I kept writing to Dad, and he kept writing back. The nonprofit grew, and Mr. Carter became family. His wisdom a steady guide. One day, he handed me a flyer for a new projected community table, where seniors and their families could share stories. "You should bring your dad," he said. I did. Months later, Dad flew to Seattle again, and we sat at that table, surrounded by strangers who felt like kin. He shared a story from his journal, his voice steady, and I shared one of mine. The room listened, and I realized this was what I'd been searching for, not just a seat at Dad's table, but a place where our stories could coexist. As we left, Dad took my hand. "You made your own seat, Lila," he said. "I'm just glad I get to sit beside you." I squeezed his hand, the ache of the past fading into something Nawa table we'd built together. One story at a time.